Welcome. Glad you're along this afternoon. Very, very pleased to have with me to talk about Convention of States and term limits. Lieutenant Colonel retired Allen West. Lieutenant Colonel, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. And as I look at what was manifest in this last presidential election, and I look at, the fiscal irresponsibility in government, the lack of term limits, which I think we truly need to hold people accountable. It seems like Convention of States is perhaps the way forward.
Well, Rick, Happy New Year. It's good to be with you and hear your voice in this 2021. And it's an honor to talk to you about this because what I see happen in the country is more people are starting to tune in and study the Constitution because, of course, we've talked about this before. We don't teach history very well.
Right.
We teach this revisionist history. We definitely don't teach civics. So in understanding the fact that our founding fathers never had the intention of us becoming a political elite class, I go back to a quote from George Mason from the Virginia Ratifying Convention to our Constitution, 17 June 1788. When he said, "Nothing so greatly impels a man to regard the interests of his constituents than the certainty of returning to the general mass of the people from whence he shall participate in their burdens." So when you look at what is happening in Washington, D.C., and it really does come down to the apathy of our general electorate in many ways, is that they just continue to be reelected. Nothing gets solved. We see our debt continue to explode. I think we're up to close to $27 trillion now, and now we're here, incoming President Joe Biden, talk about another $2 trillion of stimulus instead of opening up our economy. So we have to be concerned about this. And one way that the people, through their state legislatures, can have an effect on what's happening in Washington, D.C. is Article 5 of the Constitution, which is a convention of states, not a constitutional convention. It's a convention of states where you get the state legislatures that have a representatives, and they debate and they look at one single issue that can be amended to the Constitution. Now, a high level, it takes 34 states to come together in order to present an amendment to the Congress for a change to the Constitution. It takes 38 states for the states to be able to change and amend the Constitution. So that's a pretty high mark, and the founding fathers were brilliant in doing that. And one of the things that many people talk about in Article 5 Convention of States meetings that I've had the opportunity to travel around the country and present to is term limits for our federal elected officials.
I think it's having done this for a while and interviewed senators and congressmen and presidents, I see a federal government that is out of control in many different areas. And they're out of control because I think at one point in time, all of us, we got fat, happy, lazy, complacent, apathetic, and we simply advocated our responsibility to hold those officials accountable to someone else. Now we're trying to use a colloquial, put the horse back in the barn. I don't see any other way to hold politicians accountable other than term limits, and I don't see that happening unless you do it through Convention of States. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, because the only other way that could happen is if they were to vote on term limiting themselves. And I've been asked about this several times before, and this is what I propose is 12 years to be a member of the United States House and United States Senate. That is 2 terms in the Senate, that's 12 years, or 6 terms in the House of Representatives, that's 12 years. Now, the important thing about that, it's not transferable. You don't, spend your time in the House of Representatives and believe that, okay, I jump over and run for Senate and my 12 years starts over again. Okay, it is 12 years of federal elected service, and I think that gets them to understand I'm not up here forever. If I'm going to be up here, I have to be able to solve some things and get some things done. And then also I think that we need to look at the lucrative nature because there are some people that end up going up there and have nothing, and then they leave, much same like Harry Reid had a penthouse apartment up there in Washington, D.C. How does that happen? So we want to keep people from, going up there and being part of, what they call the swamp. And then after they do come out of office, they go over to K Street to become lobbyists because they have written laws that only they can understand. We want to break that cycle. But it also does. It is imperative that we have people that become informed, educated, and activated on this electoral process, and we've got to lose this sense of apathy that we have had.
No, absolutely. As I look at this, and maybe I'm looking at it with a bit of being a bit naive. The founding fathers, when they started this grand human experiment, they set up two circles of power. One was what they called the general government, we now call the federal government, and at the state level. And without a doubt, the state had much more latitude, much more power than it does now. The general government or federal government was very limited in the size and scope, and that has just flipped. And I think a lot of people think it's time to return the power back to the states and ultimately back to the people it affects every single day.
No, you're absolutely right. When you read the Constitution of the United States of America, it's a restraining document on the powers that are given to the federal government, and is very specific in the enumerated powers to the executive branch, to the legislative branch, to the judicial branch. But we see lines being blurred, and that's why in the Bill of Rights, which had to be included in our Constitution, the very first 10 amendments, that last amendment, that 10th Amendment, stated very simply, those powers not enumerated to the federal government resort back to the states and to the people, to the individuals. Because what the founding fathers wanted was the right relationship between the individual and the institution of government. But that relationship, as you just pointed out, has been turned upside down, so that now the individual is being subjugated and is becoming more subservient to the government than it should be the other way.
Let me ask you a very tough question. Talking with Lieutenant Colonel retired Alan West, who is also the Texas...
Nothing's tough unless I'm getting shot at by the Taliban, so go ahead.
Well, I promise you it's not that tough. How realistic is it to believe that we could get to 34 and subsequently 38 states to ratify? I got to tell you, all the years I've been in television and radio, this really feels like something whose time has come, because the people have no control. They have no control. Before it was at the ballot box. Now they no longer have trust in the electoral process, and in some cases, legitimately. What else is there other than the Convention of States?
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for conventionofstates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to conventionofstates.com and volunteer today.